Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Today is the 29th day of January 2023, and I'm offering you a reading from Twilight Language from not Doctor, but Michael E. Hoffman. This is the book here. It was printed in 2021. He's been 20 years after this publication of 2001, the book called Secret Society and Psychological Warfare. This is the anticipated sequel, appears in the 2021 Gateway Twilight Language, a book of radical disenchantment and revelations of the method in an era of nearly universe occult initiation. Trekking America's psychic highway on the 42nd degree of north parallel latitude, then southwest to Aurora and Moab, east to the Little Egypt, and onward to the radiant Thasma Mimes, that is the Blackjack Gambler, Kill King /33, brackets 58, the Willard Factor, Quantum Physics, Occult Murders, the Rosicrucian, Lumbering 007, and Pike, Parkland, and Paddock. Hoffman confronts the reader with the magnus opus of the cryptocracy. The reign of dead matter programmed through public rituals, civil magic, human sacrifice, and the Twilight Language, which, for the first time since antiquity, audaciously addresses the waking group mind, conveying a compelling projection of a supposedly inedible future that the author describes as a playbook of machine tyranny and dystopia darkness without end. This writing is not a wake-up call at this stage in history. The majority of the people of the West are too heavily programmed to cast off the arcana of command. This text is intended as both as a litigation of the process and permeation of the path upon which the masses have of their own volition embarked in this terminal phase of human alchemy operative for the millennium, but which only in our own time has attained its ideal subjects. Quote from Michael Hoffman. So I'm going to be reading from this particular book today, and this is called Just a Little Bit Crazy. The Howling Madness sprouted after September 11th, 2001. We have forgotten how to hate, he states here. Today, I will surprise you by complaining about how we have forgotten how to hate. The proper response to the cowardly brutes who perpetrate the horrific attacks against America is to hate them with every fiber of our being and purge ourselves of any morsel of sympathy which might seek to understand their motives. The only way to react to incorruptible evil is to wage incessant war against it and to hope they find no rest, neither in this world nor in the next. The purpose of our hatred is not revenge, but preservation of justice. We track them down because God at Sinai entrusted us with the promotion of justice, turning the jungle into a civilized society. Only if we hate the truly evil passionately will we summon the determination to fight them firmly. Odd and uncomfortable as it may seem, hatred has its place. Let us make sure, therefore, that we never make the mistake of forgiving those whose sin is so intricately woven with their rotten character that the two can never be separated. This is from Schulman Botech, Botech, the Luberat, I can't pronounce, I'll just spell it to you. The Lubavitcher rabbi of Oxford University. The next summation, the next character, not character, but the next parable here, paragraph, I should say, Americans will welcome a police state. Probes from the 1970s investigation led by Senator Frank Church had crippled intelligence gathering and covert operations. Human intelligence capabilities suffer as CIA agents wishing to pose as journalists or recruit informers with criminal backgrounds face a daunting internal approval process, unshackle our intelligence agency. The absurd rules aimed at preventing U.S. involvement in assassinations have no place. Americans will greet wider surveillance, detention for questioning, and many other precautions with relief and unified public support. Daniel J. Popeo, Popeo, from the Washington Legal Foundation. Continue. Don't rule out using nuclear weapons. In the excellent words of Paul Wolfowitz, Deputy Secretary of Defense, we must end states who sponsor terrorism. Wow. It must be fought with the most effective weapons we possess, weapons we face, the weapons we possess. A few weeks ago, Rumsfeld refused correctly to rule out nuclear weapon, and it must be fought in a manner that secures victory as quickly as possible, regardless of the countless innocents caught in the line of fire. These innocents suffer and die because of the action of their own government in sponsoring the initiation of force against America. This is Leonard Peikoff, spelled Peikoff, from the Ayn Rand Institute in a full-page advertisement publishing in the New York Times, October 1st, 2001. That's after the 9/11 deal. Continue. Allied with drug cartels and the Russian mafia, we need to be really focused, really serious, and just a little bit crazy. Terrorists and their supporters need to know that from here forward, we will do whatever it takes. It takes a homegrown network to destroy a homegrown network. Actually, we would enlist the drug cartels. They have the three attributes we need. They know how to operate as a covert network, how to root out a competing network, such as Mr. Bin Laden. They can be bought and know how to buy others. And they understand that when we say we want someone dead or alive, we mean dead or dead. The Cali cartel doesn't operate in Afghanistan, folks. It doesn't. But the Russian mafia sure does, as do various Afghan factions, drug rings. Something tells me Mr. Putin, the Russian president and former KGB spy master, has the phone number of the guy in the Russian mafia who knows the guy in the Afghan cartels, who knows the guy who knows where Mr. Bin Laden is hiding. It's going to be that kind of war. An underground network you fight with moles and exterminators. Right now is the season of hunting down people. This is Thomas Friedman from New York Times, columnist, winner of the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize in New York Times on September 28, 2001. The Twin Towers, Game of 21. The appearance of the Sentinel from 2001 at the beginning of the year 2001 in the century it symbolizes the 21st, marks the symbolic end of the preparatory processing phase, intended to program us into accepting the appearance of the devil himself as our presiding overlord. The process culminates in a hermetic game of hazard or chance. That is 21. This principle corresponds to the 2001 gateway to the 21 epoch. Secret Societies in Psychological War 2001, published in July of 2001, pages 15 to 16. The attack on World Trade Center is represented in the Rider-Waite Terror cards by the number 16 Tower card, and the attack on the five-sided pentagram by the terror number 5 of Pentacles. 16 plus 5 equals 21. The Rider-Waite Terror deck was first published in 1910 by Rider and Company in Great Britain. It was designed by the English Freemason author Edward Waite, W-A-I-T-E. He lived from 1857 to 1943. Waite was the author of the Holy Kabbalah, a mystical interpretation, a new encyclopedia of Freemasonry, and the secret tradition in Freemasonry, analysis of the interrelationship between Krah and the high grades. Waite was one of the founders of the Order of the Golden Dawn. The number 16 assigned to the Tower card symbolizes the so-called secto aurelio, meaning golden section, golden ratio, or golden number, known as phi, P-H-I, after the 21st letter in the Greek alphabet. Since the early Greeks, a ratio of length to width approximately 1.6 has been considered the most aesthetically pleasing in the construction of monumental architecture. The Fibonacci numbers are also anchored by 1.6. The ratio of successive Fibonacci numbers gets continuously closer to the golden ratio of 5, the 3.16. No matter what two numerical values are used, if Fibonacci terms are employed, continue the series, the ratio of the two terms will always be the golden ratio of 1.6, etc. The same is true for the Lucis numbers, you see, Lucas. 1, 3, 4, 7, 11, 18, 29, and 49. The Lucis sequence is made in the same manner as the Fibonacci numbers. One obtains such numbers by adding together the two previous numbers. So 1 plus 3 equals 4. That is 3 plus 4 equals 7, etc. If we take pairs of Lucis numbers and divide the higher by the lower, we get the same first two 16, 1, and 6 numbers every time. 18/11 equals 1.6363. 29-/18 divided by 18 equals 1.6111. 47 divided by 29 equals 1.6206. Ever more progressively approaching the golden mean of 1.61803398887. In other words, all of these mathematical roads lead to the basic building blocks of 1.6, which the Kabbalah weight represents as 16 in its depreciation of the downfall of the grand architecture of construction, i.e., the fall of the Tower of Babel and all sequentially Babels. All that goes up must eventually come down, but in most cases, the fall is a slow crumbling of decay. Whereas what is built with godlike conceit, the occulted edifies complex, will fall catastrophically. If Freemasons know this, then why do they continue to perpetuate their grand architect and their rivalry with God? We would answer conceit does not necessarily imply ignorance. The greatest deviltry is performed fully conscious of the consequences. Truth or consequences equals the 33rd degree. The downfall of the tower in the Inferno of September 11, 9/11 is the 9/11 emergency call to the psyche of the group mind. Wow. Let me get back to my side here. So 9/11 is an emergency call to the psyche of the group mind, unleashing imprisoned energy. A burst of illuminated consciousness was released on 9/11. Properly channeled and directed, this group mind energy is harnessed to produce conditions for the imposition of an even more enormous and conceited tower. Every successive Babel, Babel, is more towering than the previous one. Thus, does the imposing empire of the grand architect build bigger from out of the ruins of the old. The only thing not destroyed in the towering inferno in the principle that built it is symbolized by the number 11, which stays the same even when written upside down. This principle is further elaborated in alchemy imagery by the salamander, legendary creature that paradoxically thrives in fire. At the other end of the equation is the five-sided pentagon, representing both the cosmic forces of the five-pointed blazing star, which, according to the Scottish Rite Supreme Commander Albert Pike, symbolized for the Freemasons the dog star. Sirius, Sirius, which was personified in Egypt at Set-An, that is Satan, as well as by the door through which Satan power manifested on earth in the form of the exploitation of the feminine principle of wounded but undying nature. Under the occult veil of Isis, she who bleeds and is not injured, she who bleeds and does not die. The divine menstruum is represented numerically by the mean number of days in the menstrual cycle, that is 5. Thought I'd show you here's the card of the tower and the tarot cards. The union of the exploding phallic tower, 16, and the wounded but functional pentagram, 5, comprises an equation totaling 21, e.g., the point in the flow of time where the process manifests, 2001 gateway to the 21st century epoch, the age appointed for the corporate manifestation of the overlord in Masonic progression from 20 years ago in 2001 to 2021, where the overlord walks among us only partially concealed under a flimsy and threadbare cloak, which is becoming progressively more transparent, and whose civil acceptance is prophesied to be virtually universal. According to Gordon Moog, M-O-O-G, of the United Supreme Grand Chapter of Mark and Royal Arch Masons, the symbolism of passing the veils is that enlightenments which come from Masonic progressions. The entire object of alchemy art is the uncovering of the inner faculty of insight and wisdom, and the removal of the veils intervening between the mind and dividing it from its hidden divine root. The lifting of each veil is accomplished by giving a password. This maculus opus represents a departure from the incremental processing of the masses, which has hitherto, with a few spectacular exceptions, been the cryptocracy modus operandi. Recently becomes the process of conditioning through climax, where there's timing is key. It was necessary to initiate an anti-climax, a planetary false alarm in the form of the Y2K panic. You remember that? I do. We were all scared that our computers the next day, it became 2000, that our computers would not work, which hundreds of millions of people were duped into believing. Yeah, I was duped in that, definitely. In relation to the end of one millennium and the beginning of the new one, we see the familiar outline of anti-climax and a climax, a legion of false prophets and conmen who were anti-establishment mana, but whose views were trampled by the establishment predicted financial collapse in 1999 and the end of civilization as we know it in 2000. And these soothsayers raised both the physiological and the psychological adrenaline of the masses, in some cases to fever pitch in what became an anticlimax of the apocalypse. But the cryptocracy had rather clearly, through the medium of anointed prophets such as Arthur C. Clarke, signaled to initiatives and those participants whose alertness is sufficient to qualify them as self-initiatives that 2001 would serve as a climax entry point for the epoch of human alchemy. This is based upon his work again of the Secret Societies and Psychological War on page 13. The Miss Q Goem, with their character Nostradamus, were paralyzed as a passive spectacle at the end of 1999 and the dawn of 2000, looking for discernment concerning the future of nature. The 2001 advertising slogans of the giant Frankenfood agribusiness, that is Archer Daniel Midland, ADM, gives an additional hint at the determinism contours of the murderless, inedible game that is being played. Their corporate motto is ADM, the nature of the future. Writing in April 2001, published in the July edition of Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, we analyze the making of the atomic bomb from the point of view of occult ceremony. We further cite the propagation of the theory of evolution in fashioning the cryptocracy degraded new man. In the aftermath of the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, evolutionist high priest Harvard professor Stephen J. Gould used atomic terminology to refer to the ruins of the Trade Center as Ground Zero, and to make reference to the largest human structure ever destroyed in a catastrophic moment. This is based upon New York Times, September 26, 2001. Professor Gould arcade Ground Zero Q, which is now the standard term for the devastating Trade Center site, leads us to a key dictum of atomic physics, the point at which Merlin meets Einstein. Time relations among events are assumed to be first constituted by the specific physical relation obtaining between them. Hold on just a second here. This dictum is Camelot Arcadian, restated in scientific jargon, thereby making it more palatable to the postmodern mentality that would scoff at Merlin but embrace Einstein. The underlying principle is the same, however, to orient us to the space-time conjunction necessary to the maintenance of the once and future inevitability of the cryptocracy Camelot allegory. Gould's imaginary recalls that other larger human structures ever destroyed in catastrophic moment, that is the Tower of Babel. Perhaps he was covertly signaling that those who built the World Trade Center were involved in idolatry, because the edifice was another Babel, you see, the largest human structure ever destroyed in a catastrophic moment since Babel. One peers at the Ground Zero made at the World Trade Center and glimpses the ruins of modern Babel, summarize biblical eschatology. The apocalyptic age, the 21 Hazard era, came not in the snare of the 1999/2000 as focus for the Goyim by the establishment as useful idiots, but in year one of the final millennium at the 21st century gateway, which is 2001. Space-time, Odyssey, to the greatest battlefield of all. The cosmic war between alien scale and human scale, between the Antichrist reign of number and the Holy Spirit realm of poetic serpentity. All this was consciously lost on our Yahoo friends and neighbors who were deep into a predictable first stage pattern of a formidable spasm of patriotic war fever and self-righteous dribble post September 11, 2001, the early stages of the Afghan and Iraq invasions. We qualify their perception with the word consciously, because as in the aftermath of the cryptocracy's last great climax in the management of Masonic progression, JFK assassination, there is a sub-rosal shadow side to the flag-waving persona propelled out of the smoldering ruins of the Twin Towers. Doubleday of 1/1, that is 11 September, which planted seeds of doubt and wonder deep in the subconscious of Americans. Of course, 21st century Americans are not 1950 Americans. They have been run through the mill, that is the psychedelic funhouse ritual roller coaster, ever since that other double day on the calendar of American Mystical, that is the 22nd day of November 1963, in whose wake the American people were forced to confront a scary alternative reality, the reality of a shadow government over which they had neither control or knowledge. The shepherding process was thus accelerated with a vengeance. The avant-garde advertisement, music, politics, and news would hereafter depict, especially in the electronic media, sometimes fleetingly, sometimes openly, a shadow side of reality, an underground, a moral funhouse currently associated with extreme sex, extreme violence, and extreme speed. The static images of the suit and tie talking heads of establishment religion, government, politics, and business were suddenly shown to be subordinate to the shadow state, which the American people were gradually getting a bigger glimpse of out of the corner of their collective eye. The interesting function of this phenomenon is that it simultaneously produces both terror and adulteration and undercuts any offensive against it among participants, which does not possess the same jump cut speed with funhouse ambivalence. The same freeze fall chronology process is gnawing into the official fabric of the events of September 11th. In the subterranean layers of the psyche of even the most convinced Bush booster and Fed fan was a corner of the eye glimpse of the twin at work, and an ancient tradition of occult governance holds that the actual ruler does not show himself until his power becomes absolute. Instead, such a ruler invisibly, omnisciently presence prevails the land and all consciousness like a shadow. This sense of hidden rulers behind the figurehead presence in prime ministers had bored deep into the consciousness of the American people. The attack on New York Towers and the District of Columbia Pentagon constitutes a electrifying, lightning-like revelation that always accompanies the disruption of mundane routine when overturned by sudden chaos and explosive realignment. In the presence of this overthrow, the reaction to the precipitant is a burst of monumentary X-ray-like perception, illuminating what was hidden by glimpsing into a flash of insight, such as was experienced at ground zero at the site, that is, the site of the first atomic incineration. The shocking perception is subsequently suppressed and denied through the chateau of innumerable talking heads spin doctors who impose approvable solutions and expert explanations. Hence, slowly and observably, excruciating tension builds between the public world of the suit and tie solvers and explainers with their photographic record parroting of the restricted official line. And the series, SIRIUS, the Dog Star B-side of the record, with its shadows and spectacles which hint at the dark truth about the towering inferno and the wounded Pentagon, and for that matter, the wounded head of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. A population torn between these two streams may be said to mirror the psychic state termed bipolar. Since 2001, these insights have been leaked to the masses by the establishment itself in bits and pieces. The frigid 2001 official speak, which assailed us from every televiewer, has been thawed. Truths about the attacks have flooded the public consciousness long after effectively counteraction has been rendered inoperable, thereby doubting the godlike awe and rendering in which the hidden rulers are held until such time as their power is finally absolute. You follow what he's saying here, folks? At that point in their game, the overlord, Blackjack, is set to assume public universal physical manifestation. An unspoken, indeed dare not be spoken, insight was propelled in the psychic pressure cooker ignited on September 11, 2001. The impression that a hidden force was behind the Pentagon and Trade Center towers. Special operation, a force much bigger and more powerful than the Arab terrorists. This force was hypnotically suggested not so much by the actual person of the double bin Laden, that is Osama and Usama, but by the imagery which bin Laden icon invoked, that of the turbulent seer from the east, whose crystal ball and oracle powers are foreshadowing rather than stated. This was a trance state induced in the masses, who, in keeping with the revelation of the method elements outlined in the secret societies and psychological warfare. Now, I would suggest you get that book. It kind of ties into this, okay? Again, I purchased this book. This book I got from Michael Hoffman, but the book here, I got this from Amazon. Experienced certain dreamlike hypnotic cues dropped by the media and the government suggested that in special operations of this type, it is necessary that this should be deceived by their media and their government. Indeed, that it is necessary that high officials of the United States government lie to the American people. Special operations by their nature are cloaked in secrecy and deception, making it impossible to know whether officials who discuss them obliquely are being completely candid. Bush assures hot pursuit. There's New York Times, September 29, 2001, page B4, as in B as in boy. The bipolar made visible. Last week, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld held a news conference in which he quoted Winston Churchill. Okay, here it is. In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. The Pentagon later issued a clarification that Rumsfeld did not mean to imply the government would lie. Yet that seems to be exactly what Rumsfeld was saying, though. This is from Los Angeles Times, October 11, 2001. Rumsfeld did not mean to imply the government would lie, yet that seems to be exactly what Rumsfeld was saying. In addition to lying to us for national security reasons, we have also been informed that the special operation, the Game of 21, and that which emanates from it is concentrated rings entail psychological warfare. The United States is planning extensive psychological operations. New York Times, based upon October 3rd, 2001, page B4. The Pentagon also has begun deploying forces to mount psychological operations, or PSYOPs, Wall Street Journal, October 4th, 2001, on page 1. Where in any of these reports was there any assurance that the American people are not themselves targets of these operations? On the contrary, the fleeting allusion to the necessity of deception, psychological warfare, and PSYOPs would seem to hint that no one will be exempt in the mind games that is Dragnet, least of all the taxpayers who fund it. Psychological warfare operations were launched after September 11th to preempt revolt against continued U.S. collusion with the Israelis, and more serious revolt arising from inquiry into the U.S. government involvement in the attacks. Hints were dropped, ostensibly by bin Laden, but in fact concerning our own elite. For example, the White House told the media, be careful of broadcasting videos of bin Laden or his lieutenants saying they could contain coded messages. AP said this October 11, 2001. Yet, when campaigners against Hollywood and Madison Avenue manipulations attempted to document the existence of coded messages and subliminals in establishment videos and advertisements, they were diminished as paranoia cranks. What you're seeing, folks, have been for the last 20 years psychological warfare against the people here. But it's been going on for a long time, folks. It occurred with Kennedy. George W. Bush's own staffers were caught inserting subliminals into Bush's advertisements during the presidential campaign. The American-based cryptocracy regularly uses seemingly run-of-the-mill news conference, book illustrations, audio recordings, and films to send coded messages. The technique is as old as cryptocracy and venerable as the 16th century painting of Shepherds of Arcadia by Nicholas Poussin, Poussin, or of the Victorian artist Walter Sickerer, who incorporated clues to the identity of the Masonic Jack the Ripper killer in his Campbelltown paintings. Interesting. Detecting the Great Game, the next section. Andre Mitchell of NBC News reported on national television on September 9, 2001, that certain financiers had advanced knowledge of the catastrophe, had profited from the fall of the airline, insurance, and brokerage stocks through the purchase of put options. Mitchell was a bit more authoritarian than your average media dork. That she was at the time, this is true, she was a spouse of the Federal Reserve Board man being Alan Greenspan. She was married to him. Most people don't know that. Interesting how it is in almost all families, you see. On September the 10th, thousands of put options on American Airlines was purchased on the Chicago Exchange worth over $4 million. After September 11th, numerous put options were also placed on United Airlines stock in the week before September 11th. Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter and Company, which occupied 22 floors of the World Trade Center, had over 2,000 of its put options brought into 3 trading days before 9/11. They knew it. Key people, that is. This compares with an average of only 24 contracts per day in the first week of September. This deal, too, represents millions for the investor involved. They knew it. They knew it was happening. Just like they knew that Napoleon had lost at the Battle of Waterloo. Again, they knew that and put that out to people. This deal, too, represents millions for the investors involved. A similar pattern was observed with Merrill Lynch and Company stock, as well as insurance stocks. The identity of investors has, as of the writing, not been diverged. The firm that was used to place the put options on United Airlines was until recently managed by the man who served as the number 3 executive of the CIA. That is A.B. Buzzy Krongard, the former chairman of the A.B. Brown Investment Bank. A.B. Brown was acquired by Bankers Trust in 1997. As part of the merger, Krongard became vice chairman of Bankers Trust A.B. Brown. In 1998, Krongard joined the CIA and advanced rapidly to the position as special counsel to the CIA director, George Tenet. In addition to the money web in the respectable corporate world of high finances, there is an evil trend which spins a web of symbolism in a mocking carnival millennial. Ringing Brothers and Barney Bailey servers travel in 2 separate units, the Red Circus and the Blue Circus. The U.S. military psychodrama teams are divided into the red team and the blue team. Interesting that red and blue is always around, folks. The Wall Street Journal reported mind games. U.S. military red teams adopt enemy initiatives. October 2nd, 2001, page 1. The journal stated that during these mind games, the U.S. military red teams kills its own people, including women and children, then sees the landscape with the bodies. When the first reporters and CNN cameramen arrived, they announced that the enemy did it. October 2nd, 2001, page A12, column 2. Create an enemy. Just create an enemy. It's amazing. This is what they do. This is psyops. Same thing with the sinking of the battleship Maine. Lower key for sure, because people didn't see it on television. You see. We asked the question of the immediate aftermath of September 11th. How many of the system top Illuminatis disappeared in the collapse of the World Trade Center, which was home to the New York offices of the FBI, the CIA, the Secret Service, and the ATF? How many members of the elite survived the Pentagon crash? Attack which gave wide berth to Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld offices and the nerve center of the Pentagon. The airliner or missile struck a relatively thin staffed portion of the Pentagon that has been undergoing renovation. This writer had only been able to identify 2 of the system top functionaries among the victims: the wife of U.S. Solicitor General Ted Olson, O-L-S-E-N, who supposedly died on Flight 77, and John O'Neill, retired FBI commander, who was the intelligence chief in charge of the Trade Tower security from his 23rd floor command post. O'Neill had previously ran the 1993 World Trade Center bombing investigation. However, the FBI commander, William Sullivan, who was shot to death by U.S. intelligence because he knew too much about the JFK assassination. O'Neill may have been allowed to perish because he knew a good deal more about FBI culpability in the 1993 bombing than was healthy. One of the largest acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history was the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center in the United States, that is in New York. As it turned out, the FBI was fully aware of the bomb plot before the attack took place. The Muslim group involved had been infiltrated by Iman, E-M-A-D, Salem, a former Egyptian intelligence agent who was hired by the FBI and ultimately paid $1 million. The FBI even provided the Egyptian with a timer for the bomb, prompting the Chicago Tribune to publish a report headline, FBI tipster said he built New York bomb. This is based upon Chicago Tribune, December 15, 1993. The establishment quickly mocked and then dismissed a urban legend, the report that Israelis were tipped in advance of the attack on the Trade Center in Manhattan. The account was derided as coming from the Arab rumor mill. The September 16, 2000 edition of the Jerusalem Post reported the foreign ministry in Jerusalem has so far received the names of 4,000 Israelis believed to have been in the area of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Army radio reports. But no 4,000 Israelis have been reported missing by the American media. Did thousands of Judaic persons save themselves due to advance warnings in part from an Israeli electronic message service, as reported by the Hebrew language newspaper Haaretz? In a story headline, Odigo says workers were warned of attack, we read. Odigo, this instant messaging service, said that two of its workers had received messages 2 hours before the Twin Towers attack on September 11, predicting the attack would happen. And the company had been cooperating with Israeli and American law enforcement, including the FBI, in trying to find out the original sender to the message predicting the attack. Odigo, spelled O-D-I-G-O, is a well-known Israeli instant messenger application from Haaretz, October 1st, 2001. There have also been accounts, urban rumors of a group of Israeli videotaping the Trade Tower attacks as they happened. That report is also from Haaretz newspaper. 5 Israelis detained for puzzling behavior. 5 Israelis who had worked for a moving company based in New Jersey are being held in U.S. prisons for what the Federal Bureau of Investigation has described as puzzling behavior following the terror attack on the World Trade Center in New York last Tuesday. The 5 are expected to be deported. The families of the 5, who asked that their names not be released, said that their sons had been kept in solitary confinement. The mother of one of the young men explained that the chain of events, as she understands it, in Haaretz, she says that the 5 had worked for the company, which is owned by the Israelis, for between 2 months and 2 years. They have been arrested some 4 hours after the attack on Twin Towers while filming the smoking skyline from the roof of their company building. The Israeli foreign minister said in response that it had been informed by the consulate in New York that the FBI had arrested the 5 for puzzling behavior. They're said to have been caught videotaping the disaster and shouting what was interpreted as cries of joy and mockery. Haaretz, September 17, 2001. Yeah, I remember that. Absent from the World Trade Center on September 11th was the Federal Reserve New York President William McDonnell, who was in Switzerland at the time. Missing from Washington, D.C. on September 11th was Alan Greenspan, who was also in Switzerland. Federal Reserve Governors Lawrence Meyer in China at the time, Edward Gramley visiting in Arizona, and Edward Kelly, who was on vacation at an undisclosed location, who missed the attack on New York and Washington, D.C. There are telltale signs. There are certain telltale indicators when a crime is an inside job. One of these is the failure of law enforcement to interview accessible witnesses who may have had contact with either the victim or the perpetrator. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who had been under FBI surveillance for years, surmised that from his early stages, the FBI was inside the Unabomber scenario. This is why when a man matching description of a radical environmentalist turned up in Kaczynski's adopted hometown of Lincoln, Montana, a few days after the arrest of Kaczynski, publicly espousing support for Kaczynski, the FBI did not bother to question or investigate the man. Why would they? The FBI knew that Kaczynski's only accomplice were other government agencies. There was no need to conduct an authentic investigation at all. Our investigation unearthed similar evidence of Maccabee indifference in the case of 9/11. We have spoken with a relative of a passenger on a flight departing Newark Airport just after the hijack United Flight 93 airline departed for San Francisco. The passenger, a California executive in the publishing field, took time to look over the passengers on the doomed airline bound for the earlier flight to California to see if there anyone he knew. This eyewitness was not contacted by the FBI. His jet took off after the hijacked airliner from a nearby gate. The FBI, while making a great show of interviewing thousands and following tens of thousands of leads, didn't bother making contact with a prime witness and others like him. The year 2000 edition of the Criminal Acts Against Aviation, published by the FAA, cited bin Laden as a significant threat to the civil aviation, particularly to the U.S. civil aviation industry. The warning was ignored by the U.S. law enforcement. National Public Radio Morning Edition reported on September 29, 2001, that the FBI knew before 9/11 that bin Laden connected associates were training as pilots in the U.S. The U.S. spends $40 billion a year on the 11 intelligence agencies that comprise its huge secret police network. That's a total of $400 billion in the past 10 years. Yet the Bush administration says it was taken by surprise. On September 11th, the Arlington Road script was implemented, as in the Oklahoma City ruse, where the Patsy McVeigh was apprehended the day of the crime by means of self-incriminating license plates. The cryptocracy left no room for doubt as to who was to blame for the Trade Center and Pentagon attacks, within 10 minutes of the second tower being hit, CNN declared Osama bin Laden had done it. There's a red flag, folks, right there. You see? They hadn't done any investigation at all, folks. At all. Hadn't even gone through the building, you see. Another one's what happened to the building number 7, too. That's not in the book, but what happened to building 7? So CNN declared Osama bin Laden had done it. Cell phones, which were apparently impervious to inception only that morning, were suddenly yielding congratulatory phone calls to bin Laden associates that afternoon. By September 12th, U.S. government and media somehow had managed to obtain incriminating Arab language flight manuals, last wills, and testimonies of the hijackers, and the copies of the Quran, which turned up in the perpetrators' vehicles or in luggage conveniently abandoned at Boston Logan Airport. Something's fishy. And what of the tale of quickly finding a passport bearing an alleged suicide bomber real identity in the vast World Trade Center rubble before it had barely been sifted? As in the Oklahoma City germinatory self-incriminating evidence was swiftly and conveniently discovered in order to imprint the group mind with a lasting first impression, which evidence of official involvement was made to disappear, such as where were the American military air defense fighter jets after the first tower was attacked? Correct. Where were they? They were on stand down. That's my opinion. So we're going to conclude here, and we'll come back and share some more information from this particular book, Twilight Language, again by Michael E. Hoffman. Thank you for being here. I share this to you because I'm interested in truth. So I hope that your eyes are open and your ears are open to see the truth. Have a good evening. Thank you for your listening attention.